money have you got? They wanted us to go and redo. So we spent a shed load of money doing valuations, getting up accounts done. A lot of money was put into it, into the effort of saying to the banks, well, look, this is how we're going to deal with this situation. Then what happened was we also found out that the tenants were beginning to come back to us, and some of our tenants, well, actually quite a few of our tenants were council tenants. And they were coming back to us, and they were saying, well, look, we want to reduce the rent further. The council have instructed us that we should renegotiate, and this is the figure. So if you think about it like this, at that stage, over a period of 2 months, we've had to reduce the rents by almost 50%. And then the tenants were coming back again and saying, look, well, we're going to have to reduce the rents further. So we didn't really, as far as I'm concerned at the time, didn't have a choice with that, because they were saying, well, the council are instructing us that they're going to get us to move to another home if we don't get a reduction on the rents. So in the space of 6 months in totality then, the revenue that we had decreased to 1/4 of what it was, and we were also finding more and more of a turnover. So we had vacancies. So then we started, stupidly, subventing the mortgages and the interest payments with all of our money. Now, we did so on the basis that the banks were still talking to us. And we were saying, look, here's a plan. If you give us a moratorium, which is, if you like, a break for 12 months in terms of paying interest or paying capital, then we've got a better chance of getting through the next 12 months, i.e. then the next 24 months. But we found that no matter what proposal we put forward to the bank, and we put forward 4 different proposals, and on each occasion the bank would say to us, well, we're not your financial advisors, and look, you'll have to keep paying until we find some sort of way forward. So we kept paying, and for 2 years solid we paid until we'd no more money left. Literally. We hadn't got a bean. So the pressure was mounting all the time because the banks kept writing letters to us.
And can I ask you, is that where the anger and aggression started to build up in you?
Yes. Even prior to the 2 years ending, because I could actually see our rainy day fund diminishing.
Right.
Okay, and the costs were still going up because you still have maintenance costs and charges. And if you've got high turnover with property, it gets more expensive. Because a tenant might stay for a while, then they get a better deal, or they get a better looking house or a bigger house, or the council would come back and say you have to do this. And then, of course, there was compliance issues. There was more issues coming in all the time about compliance, the PRTB, levies, then there was property taxes, you name it. Everything started coming at us. And it was just, the pressure was phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. Now, there was pressure on me, obviously, but then there was pressure on my wife because there was pressure on me. And we both of us worked with the property. This was our business, if you like. So, my wife came in one day, and I always say this because it was a sort of breaking point. She came in one day and she had gotten some cash for, I think it was a deposit or it was a month's rent or something like that. Now, it wasn't a hill of beans again. It was, I don't know, 400, maybe 500 euros. And she said, Darrel, look, what do you want me to do with this cash? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I can put it into the bank account, but it's going to go towards one of the mortgages, whoever is due to be paid their mortgage. Because there's no money left there now. It's in overdraft. Or she said, we can keep it and buy food for the next month. And I said, do you know what? We'll keep it. Because at least
so things had gotten that bad. You literally didn't have money for food.
Look, it was a toss-up between whether or not we put diesel in the car or go out and do a week's shopping, or if we could afford to do both. But we decided I said, no, look, this is getting ridiculous, that we have to decide whether or not we want to buy some food.
Before you got there, though, Darrel, I mean, what position were you in, according to most people, financially prior to that? I mean, when things were going relatively well, I mean, would you be considered by your neighbours, say, a guy who was on the up and up and doing well for himself?
Well, the perception would have been that, well, they knew what I did because I was an engineer by trade and I was investing in property. So I don't hide what business I'm doing. I never have done. So the neighbours would have perceived, well, he's okay. We don't have an affluent lifestyle. I never did, and I never will. I just don't like waste personally. So the neighbours would see that.
How many properties in total were we talking about here, roughly?
Oh, in total, let me just think. probably about 10 properties.
Right.
And some of those would have multiple units in them as well. So we would have a block of apartments. Right.
So by anybody's estimation, you'd have been, a bit of a mini tycoon with property.
Yeah, that's that's the perception. Yeah, absolutely. But again, the lifestyle didn't come with that. The expectation was that at least in 10 years or so, we'd have a nice pension fund. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd have a legacy then perhaps to pass on to my children, And it wasn't, I suppose it's, I've always been, people say to me, well, why, because we only have a small house, we don't have a big, huge house or, as I said to you, Vin, we're not affluent in terms of spending money. We don't like spending money. But then again, that didn't come with building that business. We didn't have that at that stage. We didn't have lots and lots of money to spare because we kept everything tight. We were trying to make sure that the cash flow was there more so for the bank, that the properties were maintained properly for the tenants, that they were happy. I mean, we'd go out 7 days a week. Like yourself, most business people are actually very, very busy. And I've always heard this phrase that if you want something done, ask a busy man.
Correct.
And that was me.
Yeah.
And it is still me. If somebody wants something done, I genuinely will try to help them, or I'll be straight with them and say, no, I'm not in a position to do it, but I do know somebody who can help you. Yeah. So I was coming at it from the perspective that I perceived myself to be a good businessman out there, working my ass off, doing the best I could. When tenants called, we were there usually within a couple of hours, and we'd always say to them, we'd be there within 24 hours, and we always were. So we facilitated and we serviced our tenants, we serviced the properties, we maintained them. It was a good business as far as I'm concerned. It was very good because we were prepared to put the work in, and we knew it was hard work. So, yeah, your perception was, I suppose, that the neighbours thought, well, this is a mini tycoon here, but only because I would tell them what we were up to. You wouldn't guess by looking at where we live or, the car we drive, that we were anything other than, an average Joe soap.
Okay, but what I mean, in other words, if and even according to your bank manager at the time, if you'd have gone into the bank manager, he'd have been very happy to see you come in the door. Here's Darrel, the guy with the 10 properties.
Correct, absolutely. It got to the stage where I rang up the bank manager and I didn't have to ask him too much to get something done. And there was very little in the way of documentation that ever had to be signed to get something sorted out.
Okay, and suddenly did you notice a difference then at the end, approaching the end? Well,
what I did notice was it came to a stage where we had no money, and the bank wanted once again to see a set of accounts, and they wanted to see, money in, money out, usual thing. And I just got so fed up because I said to them, look, why do you want to see this again? Why do you need to see this again? You know the situation. I've spent the last 2 years trying to get you guys to work with me and put forward a proposal whereby we can all be happy for the next 3 or 4 years or 5 years. And I had plans in place for that it would work. Because I'm not stupid. I'm not a stupid man. I understand economics. I understand numbers. And I was basing it upon the bank's projections, what they were saying. And, as they say, the usual stuff going forward. And I was working based upon the knowledge that I had about the bank. But they had a different agenda all along. Anyway, this is what I found out. So I was going to the bank saying, look, we'll work together. We'll get this done. It won't be a problem. And then all of a sudden, because they realized that I was coming to the end of the amount of savings I had, they started saying, no, you have to pay this debt. And then we started falling behind on the payments.
Regardless, you mean?
Yeah, regardless.
Right.
Regardless. And I said, well, okay. I said, well, look, what I want you to do is I said to the bank then, you put forward a proposal, a viable proposal. And then they start coming out with this thing, well, we're not your financial advisors. You'll have to seek financial. If you need any help, MABS is always there. At that stage, though, they knew I had nothing in the way of savings left because they knew all my numbers prior to that, you see. They knew everything I'd put away. They knew all the accounts. I told them everything. I'd been an open book.
You spilled your guts.
I spilled my guts, as I normally do. I have a habit of doing this, as you know from recent events, Vin. So, open book. I spilled my guts, told them everything, and they knew the situation I was in, but they were still demanding I provide a set of accounts, go through an accountant. They knew the name of the accountant I was using at the time. They knew the name of the solicitor. They knew everything. There was nothing they didn't know.
And while this was going on, was the logic and reason of the situation starting to kind of crack through in your mind?
It wasn't. No.
Really?
It wasn't.
Wow.
At that stage, it wasn't. But
And
my
had you
mind
even
was beginning to crack.
had you even thought to yourself at any stage at all where money came from itself?
No, that
None of
never
this had occurred
to
to you. Okay, sorry,
No,
continue.
not at that stage. Now, it took a while longer. Now, let's just say we go back to over a year ago. We'll say December 2009. Okay? Now, during that 2-year, 3-year period, I'd also had, as I said to you before, 3 close friends stroke relatives die. And I'd attribute one of those friends, i.e. he was a business partner of mine, I'd attribute his death as being directly associated, if that's the right word, with the National Irish Bank here in Ireland. And I'll give you this story. I don't mind sharing this because it is sort of like a little while ago. At the time, one of the banks that was putting huge pressure on me, alongside the Bank of Ireland, was the National Irish Bank. And this friend of mine was also having financial challenges with the National Irish Bank. And I was heading down to, I think it was Mayo one weekend, and I called my friend up and I said, how are you keeping? And I could hear in his voice, and you know yourself, Vin, when somebody is in a certain way.
You can tell when somebody's in trouble.
Yeah. And I could just tell by the tone of his voice, he's in trouble. And I said, look, and I won't mention his name on the recording here, but we call him Mr. T. Okay. I call him Mr. T. He's my Mr. T, or he was my Mr. T. And I said, T, look, I'm going down to Mayo, and what I'll do is I'll call in and see you on the way back. Now, I said to him, look, if you want me to go into the National Irish Bank with you next week or the week after, whenever it is you're going in, I'll go in and I will help you work through whatever they're suggesting. If you want me to, there's no problem. I will do that. So he said, okay. He said, Darrel, would you call in and see me then? I said, no problem, I will. So as it happens, on the way back, I was really pushed for time. So I called him and said, look, T, I won't be able to make it, but I'll call down to you next week and we'll prepare for, going in to see the bank. And I'll prepare with you and then I'll come in with you. He said, that'd be great. Thank you very much. And I could still hear the tone of his voice. He didn't seem any better. I thought, okay, I'll be down to see him next week. Everything will be fine. So then, I think it was 3 or 4 days, maybe a week later, I got a call to say Mr. T had died. Massive heart attack. Okay? So I went in, my mind went just meltdown then at that stage, because a very, very close friend of mine. Very, very close friend.
You consider this man a mentor as well, yeah? Yeah,
a great mentor, a great teacher. And anybody, his funeral was a state funeral. That's what I could describe it as. And anybody that's been to his funeral will know exactly what I mean by that. It was a state funeral. Okay. He was loved so much in his community. As he was a brilliant mentor. He was very, very good man. Very good man. That's probably the best way to say it. Very good man.
And you attribute his passing directly to the stress that he was under?
Absolutely.
From the banking industry particularly.
I know the history as well, you see, with the NIB and the associated, what they did to him.
Okay.
So my mind then, I started going to meltdown. And I wasn't thinking about fractional reserve banking or anything else like that. I was thinking, what's going on? I was just so confused. Because another, then my stepfather died then. My stepfather had died before that. And again, another great mentor of mine, another great friend as well. And then after my friend Mr. T died, then a cousin of mine died. And he died in poverty. Okay? So all 3 men, they died in relative poverty, considering they worked hard all their lives. Yeah, they're all family men, worked very, very hard, and so they didn't all get directly involved with the banks, but 2 or 3 of them did. But they all died in poverty, and all I could see was, this is so unfair. Why should anybody die in poverty? Why should anybody be killed by a bank? What's going on there?
Especially after working a long, hard life,
yes,
fruitful, hard life,
and bringing up lovely families and lovely people themselves. They're being lovely, and they're loved by their neighbours and friends.
Exactly, and at the end of it all, to be left with your hand out to the state.